Hey guys, this is Tom, and what I'm going to do right now in this video is walk you through completing Lab 1-1, which is your first lab assignment for this class. So I am in Connect, and I am going to download this data that's available in your problem assignment. So this is called Lab 1-1. I'm going to open it up in Excel. And if you get this button up top, just make sure you click Enable Editing, and so this will allow you to edit the file. And then make sure you save this file somewhere on your computer so that you have a copy of it and you can submit it. So I'm just going to save it to my my desktop here. And just going to save it here. Alright, so the purpose of this lab is to have you guys take a set of journal entries from the accounting system. So, this is something we would have learned in Accounting 101, Biz 101, Introduction to Financial Accounting, or in Intermediate Accounting. In the beginning of Intermediate Accounting 1, we do a bunch of stuff where we talk about closing entries and adjusting entries and ordinary journal entries. So this is just a listing of journal entries from a company's accounting system. And our goal is to take this listing of entries and create a trial balance from this listing of entries. And if you remember, the trial balance is kind of like a summary of where every account stands at the end of the year. And it's the first thing we look at as accountants as we get ready to prepare our financial statements. So again, the goal here is to take this listing of journal entries and translate it into a trial balance that we can use as an intermediate step to create the financial statements. So the beginning of the process is journal entries, the intermediate step is the trial balance, and then eventually we get to financial statements. We're just going to do the trial balance piece here. Okay? So we have a listing of entries, we have a date field, and remember the columns are called fields or variables, the rows are called records, and so we have some date variables here, a journal entry identifier. It looks like it's numeric, but it's really a categorical variable here because it's just identifying the journal entry number. It's like a primary key. We have a text variable which describes the account being either debited or credited. And there's some information here regarding the person that entered the entry and also the person that approved the entry. And if I'm looking at the title of this book, it looks like VR is probably Vern Richardson, who is one of the authors of the book, and I'm not really sure who AC is here, but in any case, this is just some information here regarding who created the entry and who approved it. Okay, so to create this trial balance, what we're going to do is we're going to just create a pivot table to start. So up top here in the ribbon, and let me blow this up a little bit so you can see it. So we're going to go to Insert up top, and we're going to do Pivot Table. We're going to make sure that we have everything that we want selected. It looks like it automatically selected everything we want pretty well. So we have a range of A1, cell A1 to cell G106 down here, and that's exactly what we want. And we're going to put it into a new worksheet so we can work with it. Okay. So now we're in our pivot table sheet, and this is the spot where we can start creating our trial balance. And you'll see we have all of those fields or variables that were in the original sheet are now listed in this pivot table setup. So the first thing we're going to want to do is our trial balance is going to list all of our financial statement accounts. So along the rows, we're going to want the account names. So I'm just going to take the account name from the top window up here and drag it down into this rows box. And you can see it added all these account names into the rows. And that's what we want. And then next to each account name, we're going to want a total of debits and credits for each account. So in this values box down here, I'm going to drop debit and credit. Now you'll notice Excel automatically created a summation of all the debits, for example, that went to accounts receivable and all the credits that went to accounts receivable. Sometimes it might instead put in a count, like a count of number of journal entries that went to those places. So if that happens, all you need to do down here is where it says sum of debit, you would say hit that down arrow and go to value field settings, and maybe this is listed as count, right? And so if you change this to the count, then it says 4 entries were made to the debit side of the accounts receivable account. Now if you want to change this back to sum, all you need to do is click the same field and change it back to sum. So I'm just showing you this so that you realize that you could put different values into each of these cells in the pivot table. You can make it say the max, you can make it say count, you can make it say sum, you can make it say average. There's all sorts of things that you can put in here. So we have a good start here. We have the beginnings of our trial balance. And you'll notice our total debits are $297,927, and they're equal to total credits. And that's exactly what we want. We would be in bad shape if our debits didn't match our credits here. So it looks like so far we're in good shape. But the one thing that I don't like is that for accounts receivable, you'll notice that there are both debits and credits to the accounts receivable balance. And this is likely because we've made sales and then we've collected cash from the customers during the year. So at the time of the sale, we record a debit, and then when we collect the cash from the customer, we record a credit. But in a trial balance, we want to show these two numbers together. In other words, I don't want to show a $46,200 debit balance in accounts receivable and also show a $24,000 credit balance in accounts receivable. I want to show the net of the two. I want a number that says 46,200 minus 24. I want my debit to say 22,200 as opposed to a separate debit and credit. All right, so we have to fix this. So the way we fix this is we just click on the pivot tables here, right? So we're in the pivot table. We have the pivot table selected, and up top we're going to go to Pivot Table Analyze. And in this calculations section of this tab, there is something here that says Fields, Items, and Sets. So we're going to say we want to add to the pivot table a calculated field. Okay. So we're going to call this net debit. Right? And we're going to say this field is going to be equal to, it's like kind of like an if-then function. We're going to say if debit is greater than credit, comma, right? This is the way you can write a if-then formula in Excel, and this is a really useful skill. So what we're saying here is if the debit is greater than the credit, we're going to tell Excel to do after this comma, right? So we wrote equals if debit greater than credit, and we have a parentheses here. If that's true, after the comma, we're going to say do debit minus credit. Okay. So Excel's going to take this if-then logic, and it's going to say, okay, well, is the debit greater than the credit? If that is true, it's going to do this calculation, debit minus credit. Okay, so we're going to add that to our list. And we're also going to want to put in here a net credit function. So we're going to say, in this case, if the credit is greater than the debit, we're going to do credit minus debit. And now we're going to add, so net credit, if credit is greater than debit, do credit minus debit. And this will be relevant for things like notes payable down here. You'll notice notes payable has $31,300 in the credits and $4,000 in the debits. So in that case, we should get something that shows up in the credit column. So let's see what happens. We're going to add this to our list. we're okay. We have everything we need. We have the new net debit and net credit functions. We'll click OK. And now we have these two new columns in the pivot table. We have the sum of the net debits, the sum of the net credits. If we look at accounts receivable, we're expecting to get 46,200 minus 24,000, or 22,200 in the debit, and that's exactly what we got. For accumulated depreciation, we were expecting 1,000 minus 0 in the credit. That's what we got. And so it looks like this was constructed correctly. This is now what we want. So we can get rid of that check there. And if we click back into this pivot table, now that we have these new fields, sum of debit, sum of credits, we can get rid of the main debit and credit columns. We only want to keep the net. All right? So now we have a trial balance that looks like it's closer to what we want it to look like. There is one problem though, and the problem is this grand total is not working the way we would expect it to work any longer. And it also looks like these accounts are kind of ordered in an alphabetical way, but we want these things to be ordered in the way they would appear in the financial statements. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this pivot table, we're going to highlight it, and we're going to say copy, and we'll go to a new worksheet in Excel, and we are going to paste special, and we're going to say paste values. So this thing that says 1, 2, 3 here. We're not going to take the formulas from the other sheet. We're only going to paste the values that appear in the pivot table. Okay. So now we have all the values from the pivot table, but now we can edit this a little bit. Okay. So the first thing we said we didn't like is the grand total wasn't right. All right, so we're just going to get rid of this, and we're going to say, let's sum up all the debits and let's sum up all the credits. In Excel, there's this great button here. It's called the function button. Right, so up here, if you click Insert Function, you can search for any function imaginable. For example, if you want to calculate the maximum of a set of values, you can type maximum, and here's a function that will calculate max for you. Okay. Here we want to just add up the sum, so we want the sum function. Okay, and we're going to say this is the function we want. We want sum. We'll click OK, and now it's going to say, well, what do you want to sum up? All we have to do is highlight the values that we want to add up. So here I'm going to sum up cells B2, right? B2 right here, down to cell B25. Okay? And we're going to say OK. And that's good. We'll hit OK again. And now it looks like we have an appropriate sum. Okay? So I'm just going to bold this because it's a total, and let's add a little formatting here. So I want to put in this formatting that will kind of highlight that this is a total. So I'm going to say top and double bottom border, right? And I don't like the way these numbers look. I want them to kind of have a number format. So I'm going to say, let's click up here. We'll change the number to, let's use the accounting format, and let's not have any decimal places. We'll use the $sign. That's fine. And then we'll click OK. Alright, so now it looks a little better. And we now have our sum. Okay? Now we also need the sum over here in this cell. Now I could go through the same process where I could say, click the function, search for sum, click OK, and then highlight the values. A really useful feature in Excel, though, is you can copy and paste formulas. So if we want, we could say copy the formula we just set up here and use the same one over here in column C. Okay. And So now we cut out a step because we just recreated what we've done already. And let's check. If you click in this formula bar, it'll highlight the numbers that it's summing up, and it looks like it's summing up the right values. And we have the appropriate amount. And again, our debits equal our credits, which is exactly what we want. So we're looking good there. Now let me talk to you a minute about this copying and pasting of formulas. Now you notice I copied this formula in cell B26 into cell C26, and it worked. It did exactly what we wanted to do. But let's see what happens if we say copy cell B26 and let's paste it down here. Now, what's going on here when I paste it? You'll notice that it's moving, or it's copying or summing up some cells that we don't want it to. Right? So it's adding in, it's missing these values up top in cells B2 through B7, and it's adding in the total that we've already calculated. That doesn't make any sense. And so what Excel does is it kind of, if the original sum that you had in your function included rows 2 to 25, that's 24 rows. Excel will shift, wherever you paste this formula, it will shift it in a way that it will calculate the next set of 24 cells. So one way to avoid this is to use something called absolute references. So an absolute reference tells Excel, do not move the rows. When I copy this formula and I move it into a new cell, keep the same exact rows that we were using in the original formula. So to add this absolute reference, all you need to do is, in the formula bar, put a $sign in front of the row numbers. Okay? So these $signs are called absolute references. Now we're telling Excel, take the sum of cells B2 to B25, and if I happen to copy this formula, don't shift the row numbers. Keep the same exact row numbers that I have in this original formula. Okay. I'm going to click enter. And let's see if we copy this now, what happens. So I have the absolute references in here now. I'm copying a cell that has absolute references, and I'm going to copy it down here. We should get the same total. And it looks like we do. Right? So it's an important thing to pick up when you learn Excel. You want to make sure you understand absolute references and how they work. All right, so that's just a brief introduction to absolute references. We don't need this for anything, so I'm just going to delete this. The last two things I want to do is I want to change these headings a little bit. So I'm going to make these look nice. I'm going to say these aren't row labels, these are accounts. And these are, I'm just going to call these debits and credits. Right. I'm going to center these so it looks nice. And very last thing, I kind of want to put these accounts in the order of the balance sheet and the income statement. So I don't like that cash is down here at row 7. I'm going to right click on this row. I'm going to say cut, and then I'm going to go up to here to row 2, and I'm going to say insert cut cells. So I move cash up to this account. And we're going to have accounts receivable. It looks like an allowance should be after accounts receivable, so I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to say cut allowance for doubtful accounts. And then what else do we want here? I don't want to go crazy with this. I'll just show you a few. Looks like maybe building would go next. This is the long-term asset. Insert cut cells, accumulated depreciation, and then we're going to have equity accounts. We're going to say equity accounts here. What else do we have? Notes payable is a liability account. We want that before the equity account. What else? What else? What else? Computer supplies. We'll put that up here with building. I think you guys get the idea, though. We just kind of want to put these things in the order that they would appear in the balance sheet. prepaid insurance would be up here. And so we'll put this up in current assets. But in any case, it doesn't matter the exact order. You don't have to have, for example, building before computer supplies or computer supplies before building. My point here is that when you set up the trial balance, you kind of want the trial balance in the order that it would appear in maybe the balance sheet and then the income statement. But that's not the important thing here. What the important thing is, this idea of cutting and pasting rows. So if you right-click on the row, you can click Cut, and then you can move it to wherever you want by right-clicking in the next row and clicking Insert Cut Cells. Okay. So that's the important thing here. The other important thing is, you'll notice when we made those changes, the total changed here. And the reason for that is because we had referenced a sum to a row that we moved. We moved the row, and then Excel can't find it any longer. So if you look at the cells that this thing is highlighting, our formula is no longer correct. So sometimes when you make or you move accounts around, or you move rows around, or you move columns around in Excel, you're going to have to update your formula. And so it looks like we're missing the cash account in our sum right now in the debit column. So we can fix this by just dragging the blue box here back up to B2, and our total is now correct. Let's see if anything changed in our credit column. It looks like it has. Even though our total is correct, it looks like we're missing row 2 again here. So we want to just click and drag this up again. All right. So that is Lab 1-1. Hopefully this gets you some exposure to pivot tables, and also to calculating sums and using absolute references and moving around rows within a sheet. So take care, and I will see you soon.